welcome to Literary Prospects, where we talk to authors and literary professionals about books, publishing, and the writing life. I'm Kelley Vick. I'm the host of the program, and in just a moment, it will be my pleasure to introduce today's guest. But first, a reminder that if you like what you hear, please do take a moment to subscribe. It helps us out, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. Also, we've opened a Literary Prospects shop, so if you're looking for bookish shirts, totes, and gifts, please check that out at literaryprospects.etsy.com. And to grab books featured on the podcast and check out more curated book lists, you can visit the Literary Prospects bookstore on bookshop.org. We'll leave all those links below in the show notes. And now, let's introduce today's guest. Jennifer McGaha is the author of 3 works of creative nonfiction: Flat Broke with Two Goats, a 2018 Overdrive Big Library read; Bushwhacking: How to Get Lost in the Woods and Write Your Way Out, a Thomas Wolfe Memorial Literary Award finalist; and, most recently, The Joy Document, a collection of 50 essays celebrating midlife. Jennifer's work has also appeared in many magazines and literary journals, including Image, The Huffington Post, The New Pioneer, Lumina, Pank, The Chronicle of Higher Education, Brevity, Bitter Southerner, Crab Creek Review, River Teeth, and others. An Appalachian native, Jennifer teaches at the University of North Carolina, Asheville, where she also coordinates the Great Smokies Writing Program. She lives in a wooded North Carolina hollow with her husband, 2 cats, 4 unruly dogs, 9 relatively tame dairy goats, and an ever-changing number of chickens. Jennifer McGaha, thank you so much for joining today to talk about your delightful new book of essays, The Joy Document. Author Rainey Howard says, in a culture that fears aging and perpetuates ideals of youthfulness, The Joy Document offers wisdom that honors the process of growing older. Library Journal says this title will inspire readers to pause with a new sense of awareness that every moment can provide an opportunity for self-discovery and gratitude when approached with openness and intentionality. Publishers Weekly says McGaha's lyrical prose lends depth to life's seemingly forgettable moments. And author Karen Luth Jackson says this delightful book of essays is infused with wisdom and light. The Joy Document challenges each of us to look for beauty and kindness in what surrounds and perhaps confronts us. And one more, author Karen Walren says, with her beautiful storytelling, Jennifer McGaha inspires us to join her in creating a light-filled life. Through a commitment to curiosity, to mindful noticing, to gratitude, to joyful celebration, she epitomizes what it means to be a radiant rebel. So with that, what can you tell us about The Joy Document?
Thank you for that wonderful introduction and for having me. The Joy Document came about when the year I turned 55, and I thought about how when my grandmother turned, she was in her 80s and I was in my 40s, and I was just making conversation with her one day, and I said, "What's your favorite year so far?" And she said 55. That was her favorite age. And I thought she was just trying to make me feel better. Like she just probably didn't remember exactly how old I was, but was trying to pick something that I hadn't reached yet. And she was just that kind of person. And then when I hit 55, I thought, oh yes, this really is a wonderful time of life. And in a culture that celebrates youth so much, I thought that maybe there really was something very special about this time in life that we didn't talk about as much, or at least that I had not heard people talking about as much. And so I wanted to mark it in some way. And my goal was to write 55 essays in my 55th year. And I wrote 55, and then we ended up in the editing process, cutting it back to 50 essays. But it was a wonderful exercise for me, because I've written 2 other books that are memoirish, and they've involved a lot of looking back.
Mhm.
And this one, I wanted to make sure it does involve some looking back, but it also, I tried to start each one in a specific moment, current moment, so that I was really celebrating the moment I was in. And it was a really joyful exercise. It was fun to write. It was fun to pick out these little seemingly forgettable moments and try to figure out what message might be in them or what delightful thing might be in them.
When did you know that you were going to publish this project as a book? Did you know from the beginning that that was what you wanted to do, or was it sort of a personal thing starting out and then you decided this is going to be a book?
Um, that's an interesting question. I think writers kind of always have that next project in mind, right? Like what's going to happen next. So it was a combination of both of those things, of starting to sort of do that for myself and then beginning to realize that, oh, there might be themes emerging, or these might be connected in a way that would lend itself to a book.
Yeah. So what exactly was the process like? Were you kind of jotting down a list of things that brought you joy each day and then deciding what you wanted to go back and flesh out? Were you journaling each day? How did you get from taking notice of these moments of joy to this beautiful essay collection?
Um, my process is always chaotic. So I don't have a specific time or particular ritual. I was teaching a lot at the time, and a lot of the essays are about teaching or refer to teaching. So often I would give my students a writing exercise, and then I would write while they wrote. Then I would go back to those, of course, and revise and figure out how they fit with the others. But a lot of times it was just a snippet, or I would have an interesting conversation with someone at the grocery store, and I would take notes and then later go back. Um, so, and then I eliminated some that I felt like didn't fit exactly with what I was trying to do there, because some themes started emerging, like food is a big theme in the book, music, the outdoors. I'm a big runner and hiker and dog lover. And so as I was writing about just what I did every day, I realized, okay, these are the things I'm doing. I'm listening to music, I'm cooking, I'm running, I'm playing with my dogs. And so those were the things that I started maybe paying even more close attention to, figuring out, okay, what is it today that might fit there?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you saw these themes emerging, decided which essays were going to go into the collection and which ones weren't. How did you figure out sequencing? Because they're not exactly in like a chronological order of your
Oh,
year, right? So, and you've got these 50 essays. It seems like a big task.
that was challenging, and structure has always been challenging for me. So I actually the title of the book as I had written it was Hanging in There. That was my original thought for what the title would be. And there's an essay called Hanging in There.
Mhm.
And then when I started working with the editor at my publisher, they really liked the Joy document. They thought it was a more uplifting title, maybe that it reflected more the spirit of the collection. And so they really wanted that one first. And so once that one was first, the others are pretty much seasonal. Um,
Mhm.
and they just sort of follow the year, because it felt weird to have a year of jumping around to me. Like, if
Mhm.
since it was following, I didn't write every day for a year, but it did sort of follow me through the year. And I felt like there was one essay that felt sort of pivotal to me, the one that felt like there was a bit of a turn there, or that was where sort of the heart of the book to me. So once I figured that one out, I was able to kind of structure around it. I'm still not sure they're in the perfect order, but
Are we ever sure that anything is
no,
perfect?
no. Every time I look at it, I think, oh, that one should have gone there. Thank
Constant
goodness
state
for
of
editors,
revision.
right?
Yeah. In writing this book, you researched other works dealing with joy. Ross Gay's Book of Delights, Zadie Smith's essay Joy, to name a couple. What did you learn in researching how other writers have approached joy that surprised you, maybe?
I I think the biggest thing is that um, the notion of joy as complicated and nuanced. Ross Gay talks about that the thing that we all share is sorrow. Is that every, and I don't think I can quote it exactly, but that is what we have in common is mortality. The fact that we all know we're going to die. We're going to know that we know that everyone we love is going to die, that everything we love will pass. And so that's what connects us.
Mhm.
And he says at one point, what if we join our wildernesses together, our sorrows together, and what if that is joy? And Zadie Smith has a really similar in Joy is Such a Human Madness. She talks about that too, about deep joy as being different from pleasure or momentary happiness, but deep joy being inextricable from sorrow.
Mm.
And so I think that freed me because I'm sort of a dark soul at heart. And so it freed me to think about joy not as this simple, not just as optimism
Yeah.
or as a simple emotion, but something more layered and nuanced. And I was able to talk about things that were hard and things that were difficult, even while celebrating the things that I wanted to celebrate. So I think that's the biggest thing I got from reading other people's work.
How do you define joy now?
Oh, that's hard. I think I'm always reaching for that definition. I am a pessimistic person by nature. I am just a glass half full person, and I have to be intentional about. I can go toward the darkness if I let myself,
Mhm.
and it. So I don't know that. I think it has to do with human connectedness. I think for me, it has to do with recognizing the best parts of other people and the best parts of my life in a way that doesn't shy away from facing hard things. And that's as close as I've gotten.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a wonderful definition and way of thinking about it. It's interesting that you say that you are a dark soul, I believe is like part of what you said, because there are these beautiful um, moments of levity in the collection. I mean, it's quite funny in in a lot of places. Um, does that come naturally to you, or are you kind of reaching for that? It seems to come naturally.
Well, I my humor is kind of dark at times. I think I have a quirky perspective, and
Mm.
I always have, and that's just kind of part of who I am. Um, so I'm glad that you think that comes through in the collection. I Humor and darkness are just sort of different sides of the same thing to me, right? Like this, yeah. So I laugh a lot, and I struggle a lot with those big questions, which I think a lot of writers do. I think a lot of artists do, and a lot of human beings do. But I think artists in particular, we live in that space between light and darkness, maybe more than other people.
Yeah. Do you feel like the process of working on this particular project has changed your perspective?
Yes, being in, I think naming those things is so powerful. Naming what brings you joy, writing it down, making a list of it. I think that you're training a muscle, just like when you're training at the gym, you're training your attention muscle. And so that every interaction means something more. Every stranger that you see then becomes a more full human being. A lot of the essays sort of take a small interaction, like with the checkout guys at Trader Joe's or a man I meet in the parking lot at Ingles, and it sends me sort of into this personal reflection, exploration as well. And I do think other people become more fully human when you consider their personal stories, what may have brought them to that moment. And also you see where there's overlap.
Yeah. Yeah. You say that you've discovered that joy must go hand in hand with gratitude as well. Can you talk about what you mean by that?
Yes, I think being grat I think they're the same in many ways, right? Like
Yeah.
realizing that I'm trying to think of an example from the collection. There's an essay about growing up, about my childhood and where I'm at um, my paternal grandmother's home. And the essay starts with me making a trifle for my brother. And then it ends with talking about the trifles that we grew up having. Trifle, which was just a bunch of Jello and Cool Whip and pound cake mixed together when I was a kid. And so the moment that I begin the essay in is not the moment I end the essay in. It takes me back to another time and place where I'm thinking about my childhood and moments that I haven't thought about in a long time, but that I realize have led me to where I am. And so
Mhm.
it's all about connectedness again. Like um, we can all go back and look at our childhoods and wish this had been different or that had been different. But what are those moments that we return to that we realize fed us in some really fundamental way or shaped us in some fundamental way? And in that particular essay, I'm thinking back to my exposure, which I talk about really early on, to the people of the mill town where my grandparents lived and where we spent a lot of time as kids. And growing up, having sort of a different life just across the mountain where I grew up, but yet I spent so much time in my grandparents' home that I really had this close relationship with many uncles and cousins who had very different lives growing up. And so I feel as an adult deep gratitude for those kind of moments that led to where I am now. And so I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but it all feels connected to me.
I love that at the end of the book, you include some guiding questions that readers can use to create their own joy document. What compelled you to include that?
Um, I can't remember whose idea it was. It came out of a meeting with my agent and my editor where we were talking about how people might use the book
Hmm.
and where they might see themselves in the book. And I teach writing classes and writing workshops all the time. So a lot of those are writing prompts that I modified.
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and I've done various themed workshops on writing about joy. So it was sort of a natural extension of the teaching that I've done and the conversations that we all had about how somebody might use that as part of a discussion or a writing workshop.
Do you think that you'll continue this practice of documenting joyful moments in other particular years or stages of life, or kind of just, I guess, on a daily basis?
I'm 200 pages in, so we'll see to this mess that has no real structure, but that, but and I don't know what will come of it, but I do continue um, to make those lists. It's just so fun to start in one place and see where it goes. And I think that's one of the great things about memoir writing, whether in a list like this or in a more conventional format where you discover things about yourself as you write, and you discover the meaning of certain people in your lives or certain moments in your lives that you otherwise might miss. And so I think that part of the writing practice is something I will continue.
Have you always been a writer?
I have, so just from the time I was very young, a reader and a writer. Yeah, I think I performed my first poem in church when I was maybe 7, something like that.
Wow.
My
Wow.
first and last poem. Um, I wish I were better at poetry, but it was about birds. That's all I remember. It wasn't very good.
Well, from then, what was your what was your journey like with writing? What was the road to publication like for you?
I Well, I wrote for years and did, submit it. Well, I my first degree is just in English, and then my first master's is in English, and then I went back to get an MFA from Vermont College of Fine Arts. And during the program, I started working on I had been publishing single stories
Mhm.
and single articles, but in the program is when I really tried to put together my first manuscript. And I did that in the first semester there, and found an agent after that and was published. So that process, that sort of the structure of the program, the feedback, the regular feedback, and it helped me find um, a structure for all these things that I have been wanting to say, a
Yeah.
container.
And
So, and
then,
then, and after that, I moved more into, then my last book was an essay collection.
Mhm. How did you find your agent?
I've had the first one I just randomly queried, and well, both just query letters, the
Mhm.
old school way of writing the query letters. And yeah.
And then you found the agent, everything gets sent out. Was it a long process once you found your agent for the first book, which was Flat Broke with Two Goats, right? That
Yes.
was the first one?
Yes.
Yes. So once you found your agent, was that a long process to getting that to publication? Or
No, it's finding the agent's the hard part, I think.
yeah,
It's just so hard to get in the door.
yeah.
And then once you do that, it seems like the rest of it, if it's a good match, and it goes pretty quickly from there. At least in my experience, I did not have an agent for my second book, and I just queried presses that I thought would be a good fit.
Mhm.
Um, and my books have been a little different. I mean, the first one was a straight memoir. The second one was an essay collection with this strong theme about nature. And it went to Trinity University Press, which was more, they do nature writing. And then this one has a spiritual bent. And I actually queried, just queried someone an editor who had worked with some other writers who had published spiritually leaning work, which is a hard thing define exactly, because what is spiritually leaning? I mean,
Yeah.
and it is, but it is not. It's not a conventionally religious book, whatever that might be. So
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because you've said that writing for you is a spiritual practice of sorts in and of itself, writing. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that and how writing is a spiritual practice for you?
I think it goes back to the meaning making, right? Like
Mhm.
trying to figure out what things mean and why we're here, and all those deep questions that writers and of all genres are trying to get at. And so for me, the practice of naming, of gratitude, all of that feels spiritual. Um, and in this one in particular, I did talk about sort of my religious upbringing, some about um, moving away from my religious upbringing, but still having this sense of the importance of family and culture and place. And I talk about growing up. I grew up in Appalachia, and about my Appalachianness being hard to separate from the cultural religious part, being hard to separate from my personal spiritual views, because it's all so connected for me.
Yeah.
So the book does have that sort of reaching for meaning throughout.
Do you have a daily writing practice, a daily sort of routine that you go through with your writing?
No, but I should. Any day now, I'm going to start. I, the only daily thing I do is getting outdoors. Almost, I would say 363 days a year. Um, and that for me is part of my meditation. It's when I think about writing. Um, and that is sometimes for hours a day. So I would say that when I get stuck on my writing, and often I can come in from a walk or a run and then just sit down and write. If I get stuck, I will start editing something, and
Mhm.
then I can sort of move into writing if I'm having a hard time getting into it. So I try to write regularly, but it's not necessarily daily. We have a farm, and that sometimes I get up first thing and the animals need tending to and that kind of thing. So I haven't established an exact time of day. Plus, I'm not working regular hours right now outside the home. And
Mhm.
when I did, I wrote, I had more regular writing hours, but now, um, when I have all day to do it, I sometimes procrastinate.
Good to hear other people do that too.
I always feel like the answer to that should be yes.
But most people say no.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I feel better.
Yeah. It always makes me feel better. What do you know now that you maybe wish you had known before publishing your first book?
So many things. Um, I think I really wish that I had well, I think publishing my first book, I feel like there was not a long period of time between when what I wrote about in that book happened and when I published the book.
Mm.
I was kind of writing it as it was happening and then published it.
Mhm.
So perhaps it would have been better and in to wait and to give some space in between the events that
Mhm.
happen and when I wrote about it. It would have been a different story had I told it a little bit later. Um, so I don't know if I would go back and change it, but I do think it would have been a different book. And I also wish I had been a little more prepared, and maybe it's good that I wasn't, but the first book touched on some taboos, right? I talked about money a lot, and I talked about personal finances, and I think that I wish I had sort of been a little better braced for how to deal with some of the public response to that.
Dang.
I'm not sure how I would have done that, but
Yeah. People always have thoughts and feelings.
They do. Some people have really big feelings about your life.
Right. What is your best advice for aspiring authors?
You spend so much time with a book that you publish that I think it's so important to love what you're writing about, to feel really passionate about it. And I think it comes through if you're not. I think whether it's fiction or whether it's nonfiction, whether it's poetry, by the time you turn in that final draft, you have spent so many hours with it. And when I think about next projects and what I want to do next, that's the kind of thing I think about. Like I want it to be something I love versus whatever might sell best or whatever might, because those things change. Whatever is trendy changes. The industry shifts. And so I think you have to follow those things that just won't let you go, and the things you really want to spend a lot of time with.
Great advice. We have a traditional last question on the podcast, which has to do with music.
Okay.
So when the Joy document is made into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be?
Cartwheels on a Gravel Road by Lucinda Williams.
Ah, otherwise known as Car Wheel.
Right. Exactly. Either that or Happy. The song Happy by Pharrell.
I love both of those. And the Cartwheels on a Gravel Road is in reference to one of the essays in the book, for those who haven't read it yet. Jennifer McGaha, thank you so much for joining today. It has been joyful getting the chance to talk with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful talking with you.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.